The grand chamber of eternal certainty glittered like a universe unto itself. Trillions of perfectly arranged crystal facets caught the light of 3 artificial suns, fragmenting it into mathematically precise patterns across walls that stretched half a kilometer high. Elder prism of perfect order hovered at the chamber center, their crystalline body refracting light and frequencies that communicated absolute authority to the assembled High Council. For 10,000 years, the Orcsian collective has maintained perfect harmony across 3 spiral arms of our galaxy. Prism's thoughts resonated directly into the minds of the 6 other council members. Our perfect society has expanded at the mathematically optimal rate of 3.76 solar systems per standard cycle. Around them, holographic displays showed the collective's domain minus 217,385 worlds bound in flawless order, inhabited by 12,632 species, all functioning according to the grand design. Crystal, who reflects all truth, adjusted their facets to project satisfaction at the display. The integration of the Meridian cluster proceeds at 99.8% efficiency, they communicated. The indigenous life forms have accepted their designated roles with minimal cognitive restructuring required. Harmony filled the chamber as the 7 elders shared a moment of unified thought, the perfect consensus that had guided their species since the founding of the collective. The Orcsians had long ago transcended the chaos of individualism, where lesser species battled with the disorder of conflicting opinions and the inefficiency of debate. The collective functioned as one perfect entity, each crystal being precisely aligned with the whole. The moment of unity was interrupted by a discordant pulse from Junction of Infinite Data, the youngest council member at merely 3,000 years old. Honored elders, an anomaly requires attention. The perfect atmosphere in the chamber cooled by precisely 0.37 degrees, the Orcsian equivalent of a startled gasp. Anomalies were exceedingly rare in the collective. Most had been eliminated from possibility millennia ago. Specify, commanded Prism. Junction of Infinite Data projected a holographic representation of an unremarkable yellow star with 8 planets. Scout Vessel Geometric Perfection reports unusual readings from the 3rd planet of this system, designated S13,742. The absolute probability matrix has failed to generate accurate predictions for the dominant species. The council members vibrated in perfect synchronization, an expression of collective concern. Elaborate, Prism instructed. The species calls itself human. They possess mid-level technology. They have achieved limited space travel within their system, but have not yet developed faster-than-light capabilities. Their civilization should be categorized as Standard Integration Class 4. However, Junction's crystalline form flickered with uncertainty, an almost unprecedented display among the elders. However, their thought patterns defy our standard models. The scout vessel attempted 15 different psychic harmonization protocols. All failed to produce consistent results. Prism rotated slowly, refracting light in patterns that had not been seen in the chamber for 7,000 years, the formal expression of genuine surprise. Impossible. The psychic harmonization protocols have achieved 100% success on 12,631 species. What is the nature of the failure? Junction projected the scout vessel's data. The council observed images of the humans, soft, bilateral beings with varied appearances and inexplicably different adornments despite belonging to the same species. The scouts report that some humans were completely susceptible to influence, while others showed partial resistance. Most concerning, approximately 8.72% were completely immune with no discernible pattern to explain the variance. Furthermore, even influenced subjects displayed unpredictable behavioral deviations within hours. Across the chamber, a hairline fracture appeared in the ceremonial crystal of certainty, an omen unwitnessed for thousands of years. The perfect geometric patterns of light that had filled the chamber for millennia subtly distorted. The absolute probability matrix has returned an error code When attempting to predict this species' development trajectory, Junction continued, "This has never occurred in recorded history." For 3.7 seconds, the council was silent, the longest period without communication in over 5 centuries of meetings. Finally, Prism rotated to face the holographic display of Earth. Their crystalline bodies shifted into the formal configuration for a high-priority directive. This anomaly represents a potential disruption to the grand design. We will study this species thoroughly before integration. Deploy the full observational fleet. I will personally oversee the analysis. As the council dispersed, Prism remained, studying the image of Earth. For the first time in 3,000 years, an unscheduled thought formed in the Elder's perfect mind. "What are you?" Scout Commander Facet without flaw had overseen 734 first contact missions during their 897-year career. Each had concluded with the same outcome: submission, integration, optimization. The commander's perfect record had earned them their name, a rare honor among the Arctians. Now, hovering above the blue planet, Facet felt something unprecedented: uncertainty. Deploy the standard array. They instructed the crew of the Geometric Perfection, a vessel of living crystal that pulsed with blue-white light. Fold spectrum analysis, priority on psychological patterns. The ship extended crystalline appendages that shimmered with data collection energies. Below, the third planet continued its rotation, oblivious to the scrutiny from above. Commander, First Analyst Edge of Computation communicated. Initial data shows extreme variability in the dominant species. They appear to have no unified governance structure, communication protocols, or even consistent physical appearance standards, despite being genetically homogeneous. Facet rotated in surprise. Clarify. They are a single species. Affirmative. Yet they organize themselves into 195 separate nations, speak 7,117 different languages, practice 4,200 distinct religions, and deliberately maintain differentiated appearance through various forms of adornment. Inefficient, Facet concluded. Prepare the first impression protocol. We will make contact in their largest population centers simultaneously. 3 hours later, Facet personally led the Shanghai contact team. Their crystalline form, adjusted to Project Maximum Authority, descended in a beam of light into a public square. The standard psychic wave of calming influence preceded them, a technique perfected over millennia to prevent panic among primitive species. The results were immediately perplexing. Some humans fell to their knees in reverence. Others fled screaming. A group of young humans pointed recording devices at the Arctians, expressions of excitement on their faces. One elderly human approached directly, bowed slightly, and asked something in a local dialect. Translator function failing. Edge of Computation reported. Their language contains too many contextual variables and emotional modifiers. Facet intensified the psychic influence. More humans calmed, but others seemed completely unaffected. A child pointed and laughed, a response no species had ever displayed during first contact. Reports flowed in from the other contact sites. In New York, humans were responding with aggressive questioning. In Lagos, they were organizing an impromptu celebration. In Sydney, they had formed an orderly line to greet the aliens one by one, a completely unexpected protocol. "This is unprecedented," Edge communicated. Their responses show no pattern. The absolute probability matrix cannot establish predictive models. For the first time in their career, Facet made a decision that contradicted standard protocol. "We will withdraw temporarily. Maintain observation only." Back aboard the Geometric Perfection, the situation deteriorated further. Junior Scout Crystal seeking knowledge approached Facet with visible irregularities in their crystalline pattern, a sign of cognitive distress. "Commander, I have been monitoring their global communication network. The humans are discussing us." "That is expected," Facet replied. "No, Commander. They are not merely reporting our presence. They are sharing opinions, millions of different opinions. Some believe we are benevolent. Others fear conquest. Many are creating fictional scenarios about our intentions. Some are making images that depict us in impossible situations. Some are making what they call jokes about interspecies relations. Facet's perfect crystalline form developed a small, irregular facet, the equivalent of a frown. Show me. The display filled with human communications, serious scientific discussions alongside wild speculation, fears beside hopes, mathematics beside poetry, prayers beside profanity. And everywhere, questions, endless, recursive questions that the humans seem to value even without answers. More disturbingly, Facet noticed changes in their crew. 2 scouts were secretly downloading human music. Another had adjusted their crystalline resonance to mimic human laughter. Edge of Computation had begun a wholly unauthorized analysis of human art. "Commander," the ship's medical crystal chimed in, "I must report an anomaly. Several crew members are exhibiting signs of individualized thought patterns after merely 49 hours of human observation." Facet made the second unprecedented decision of their career. "We are withdrawing from this system immediately. Deploy only automated observation platforms. All personnel are forbidden from direct interaction with human transmissions without proper psychic shielding." As the geometric perfection accelerated away from Earth, Facet composed their report to the High Council. For the first time, they struggled to find the precise crystalline thought pattern to communicate their experience. Finally, they settled on a configuration unused in official reports for millennia, the pattern signifying genuine concern. Asterisk, the humans cannot be predicted. Therefore, they cannot be controlled. And what cannot be controlled? Asterisk. Facet left the thought unfinished, but deep in their perfectly ordered mind, an uncomfortable realization formed. The collective had encountered its first truly dangerous species, not because of their weapons, but because of their minds. Crystal harmonizer of wills had resolved interstellar conflicts that had persisted for centuries, unified warring worlds with a single diplomatic session, and once convinced an entire species to voluntarily relocate to accommodate the collective's perfect expansion plan. In 2000, 316 years of diplomatic service, she had never failed to achieve optimal outcomes. Now, as her crystalline vessel, a cathedral of geometric perfection, descended toward the United Nations headquarters in New York, she prepared for what the High Council assured her would be a routine diplomatic formality. Remember, Elder Prism of Perfect Order had instructed before her departure, these humans may be unpredictable, but they are still a pre-FTL civilization. Present our standard integration terms. If they resist, apply targeted psychic enhancement to their leadership. The diplomatic chamber within her ship hummed with perfect harmonics as she adjusted her crystalline form to project maximum benevolence. 6 junior diplomats arranged themselves in the formation of inevitable agreement. The humans would never know how much the collective had already compromised by agreeing to meet on their terms, in their facility, following their protocols. Such concessions were unprecedented, but the High Council had deemed them necessary after the scouts' disturbing reports. As the human delegation entered, 17 representatives from various nations, Harmonizer initiated the standard diplomatic scan, a subtle telepathic assessment that typically revealed the optimal approach to secure compliance. The scan returned gibberish. Some humans projected fear, others excitement. Several minds showed complex calculations weighing potential benefits against risks. One mind bounced chaotically between diplomatic strategies and something called lunch plans. Most disconcertingly, 3 humans seemed completely aware of the telepathic intrusion and were deliberately thinking about irrelevant topics, what appeared to be music lyrics and mathematical puzzles. "Greetings, representatives of Earth," Harmonizer projected, both verbally and telepathically. "The Arxian Collective welcomes you to the grand design of galactic harmony." The UN Secretary-General smiled. A facial contortion that Harmonizer had been briefed indicated positive reception. "We are honored by your presence, Ambassador." Humanity extends its hand in friendship and looks forward to learning about your civilization. Harmonizer proceeded with Phase 1. Establishing superiority. The collective spans 217,385 worlds across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. Our civilization has maintained perfect harmony for 10,000 years. We have eliminated conflict, scarcity, and disorder from our domain. We offer Earth the privilege of integration. She projected the standard integration terms into the center of the room. Planetary resource optimization, population distribution protocols, cultural standardization timelines, and psychic enhancement schedules. Instead of the expected awe and immediate acceptance, the human delegates began asking questions. Endless questions. What exactly does cultural standardization entail? Asked the representative from Kenya. Can you elaborate on psychic enhancement? Inquired the delegate from Japan. How does your economic system function? Pressed the representative from Brazil. Do you have music? Asked the delegate from France, a question so unexpected that Harmonizer's crystalline form briefly lost coherence. Hour after hour, the questions continued. When Harmonizer answered one, 3 more arose. When she attempted to redirect toward formal acceptance of terms, the human suggested taking a break for refreshments, an inexplicable interruption of critical diplomatic proceedings. During this break, Harmonizer observed with growing concern as the human delegates who had earlier displayed conflicting thought patterns now engaged in casual conversation, laughing together and apparently forming spontaneous alliances despite their disparate objectives. When negotiations resumed, the Secretary-General presented a counter-proposal, a concept so foreign to collective diplomacy that Harmonizer required 12.3 seconds to process it. We propose a gradual cultural exchange program before any formal integration, he stated calmly. Perhaps we could begin with scientific collaboration and mutual learning. Harmonizer attempted to project the thought pattern of inevitable compliance, a technique that had subdued the resistance of 1,000 species. The Secretary-General smiled again and leaned forward. While I appreciate the impressive light show, Ambassador, I should mention that I've been mentally reciting my favorite opera to avoid any unintended influence. We humans value our autonomy of thought quite highly. For the first time in her ancient career, Harmonizer found herself without a prepared response. The standard protocols had failed. The humans had not only rejected immediate integration, but had somehow detected and neutralized psychic influence. More disturbing still, they weren't refusing outright. They were suggesting alternatives, showing interest in Arxian culture, asking about Arxian art forms that the collective had optimized out of existence millennia ago. Harmonizer excused herself and retreated to her private chamber, initiating an emergency communication with the High Council. Elder Prism, she projected, her thought patterns showing unprecedented disturbance. We have encountered a diplomatic scenario without precedent. The humans cannot be efficiently processed according to standard protocols. They require conversation. They desire exchange. They expect compromise. The silence from the High Council stretched for 7.2 seconds, an eternity in Arxian communication. Finally, Elder Prism responded. Adapt, Harmonizer. For the first time in 10,000 years, the collective must learn. The Arxian Cultural Exchange Facility on Harmony Station gleamed with perfect symmetry, every angle precisely measured, every surface optimally reflective. For 3 standard cycles, it had remained pristine, a controlled environment where selected human representatives could interact with collective citizens under careful supervision. Symmetry Coordinator Third Rank adjusted their crystalline form in distress as they led Elder Prism of Perfect Order through the facility. The once perfect harmony had been disrupted. It began with these, Symmetry explained, gesturing toward a wall where geometric patterns had been painted in vibrant colors. The humans call it a mural. The maintenance workers created it during their standard rest period. When questioned, they claimed it was beautiful and fun. Elder Prism studied the unauthorized artwork. The patterns were mathematically imprecise, with deliberate variations that served no functional purpose. Yet Prism could not deny a strange resonance in their crystalline form when observing it. "How many such incidents have occurred?" Prism inquired. 374 documented cases across 17 collective worlds in the past 60 days. Symmetry reported. The influence appears to be spreading exponentially. They continued their inspection, passing a gathering area where something even more disturbing was occurring. A group of young Orcs had modified their crystalline forms with asymmetrical patterns. Some had even incorporated color variations that served no classification purpose. The young ones call it expression. Symmetry explained, vibrating with concern. They observed humans decorating their bodies with clothing and accessories and began experimenting with their own forms. When instructed to return to standard configurations, they asked why, a question that has increased by 2,700% among collective youth since human contact began. Elder Prism absorbed this information in silence. The asking of why, a question the collective had nearly eliminated through perfect optimization, represented a fundamental threat to ordered society. Questions led to variations. Variations led to disorder. Disorder led to... Prism's thought process faltered. The ancient fear that had driven the collective's expansion for millennia stirred deep within their perfect crystalline lattice. Their inspection led them to the central concourse, where the most troubling development awaited. A human had established what they called a restaurant, a facility for the consumption of nutritional resources prepared with deliberate inefficiency for the purpose of sensory pleasure. The line of collective citizens waiting to experience this extended for 300 meters. Efficiency metrics in this sector have declined 8.2%, Symmetry reported. Yet, satisfaction surveys show a 24.7% increase. Our models cannot explain this contradiction. At a nearby table, an Archean scientist named Refraction of Complex Truths was engaged in animated conversation with human physicist Dr. Elena Vasquez. Their discussion violated 17 protocols for information exchange, pursuing theoretical questions with no immediate practical application. The problem is spreading beyond our containment protocols, Symmetry concluded. The humans call it cultural exchange, but our analysts have another term, contagion. Elder Prism approached the scientist's table, intending to observe directly. Dr. Vasquez looked up and smiled. Elder Prism, please join us. Refraction and I were just discussing how quantum entanglement might be related to your species' telepathic abilities. We have some fascinating theories about consciousness as a quantum phenomenon. Before Prism could formulate an appropriate response, Refraction did something unprecedented. They adjusted their form to create what appeared to be a human-style seating space beside them, a gesture of welcome that mimicked human social customs. Elder, the humans have perspectives on physics that our models never considered. Refraction communicated with unusual intensity. They approach problems with intuitive leaps that defy logical progression, yet often arrive at valid conclusions. Dr. Vasquez has helped me identify 3 new research avenues that our standard algorithms overlooked for centuries. Elder Prism reluctantly joined them, scanning Dr. Vasquez's mind and finding it characteristically human, a swirling chaos of ideas, emotions, and random observations somehow coalescing into coherent thought. Your people have been integrating our physics models quite quickly, Dr. Vasquez noted. But you seem surprised by our cultural influence. Did you expect it to be one-directional? The question contained an insight that troubled Prism deeply. The collective had always assumed cultural exchange to be a process of absorption and optimization, taking useful elements from other civilizations and discarding the rest. The possibility that collective citizens might adopt inefficient human practices had never been anticipated. As if to emphasize the point, a group of young Orcs passed by, their crystalline forms resonating with what Prism recognized as human music, complex patterns of sound with no practical purpose beyond emotional stimulation. Prism turned back to Dr. Vasquez. We did not predict this outcome. She smiled again. That's the thing about cultural exchange. Elder Prism. Nobody ever does. Culture isn't just transferred, it transforms. Both sides become something new. As Prism departed the station, they composed an urgent message to the High Council. The human influence could not be contained through standard protocols. It spread not through force or even persuasion, but through something the collective had never encountered before: choice. Collective citizens were choosing disorder, inefficiency, and imperfection, and reporting increased satisfaction as a result. The perfect machine of collective society hadn't broken. It was evolving. And for the first time in 10,000 years, its future could not be calculated. The thought harmonizer occupied an entire asteroid, hollowed out and lined with perfect crystalline structures that amplified computational power to levels incomprehensible to most species. For millennia, it had predicted the behavior of entire civilizations with 99.998% accuracy. The collective's military command had used its projections to optimize subjugation strategies for thousands of worlds. Now, it was failing. Admiral Facet, that cuts through deception, watched as the quantum processors overheated again, their perfect lattices distorting as they attempted to model human decision-making patterns. 17th failure. Noted Analysis Prime, Angle of Deepest Insight. The system cannot establish stable prediction matrices for even a small sample of human minds. The Admiral's crystalline form vibrated with frustration. Explain. The humans appear to operate on multiple decision frameworks simultaneously. Angle explained, projecting the partial results. They routinely make choices that contradict their own previous decisions, yet maintain internal narratives that somehow reconcile these contradictions. They simultaneously believe competing truths. The Admiral studied the projections, focusing on one human subject, a mid-level diplomat named Sarah Chen. Subject exhibits clear pattern recognition capabilities and strong logical reasoning. Angle continued, yet repeatedly makes choices based on what they designate as intuition or gut feeling, neurological processes that appear to bypass their own logical frameworks. More puzzling still, these intuitive leaps often prove correct despite lacking logical foundation. Admiral Facet rotated slowly, processing this information. Are they aware of this contradiction? Some are, others are not. They have philosophical frameworks built around these contradictions, concepts they call paradox and dialectic thinking that embrace logical inconsistency rather than eliminating it. The implications disturbed the Admiral deeply. The collective's military strategy relied entirely on predictability. They rarely needed to engage in actual conflict. The thought harmonizer simply calculated the optimal pressure points to apply, and resistance collapsed with minimal resource expenditure. We must find a pattern, the Admiral insisted. Every species has predictable behaviors. Angle of Deepest Insight adjusted their form to convey respectful disagreement. Admiral, our analysis suggests the humans' unpredictability may be their evolutionary advantage. Their homeworld features rapidly changing conditions and diverse threats. Their cognitive flexibility allows them to innovate solutions that rigid logical systems would never consider. As if to punctuate this assessment, an emergency communication arrived from Orbital Platform 6 in the Meridian Cluster. Critical reactor cascade failure in progress, reported the platform commander. Automation systems unable to contain. Catastrophic failure projected in 47 minutes. Human technical advisors on site, requesting authorization to implement non-standard solution. The Admiral hesitated. Standard protocol prohibited deviation from established safety procedures, especially by non-collective personnel. Yet the alternative was losing a strategic platform and potentially millions of collective citizens. Explain their proposal, the Admiral demanded. The platform commander's response revealed a solution so unorthodox that it violated 17 fundamental engineering principles. Yet the human engineers insisted it would work, based partly on calculations and partly on what they called professional intuition. implement the human solution. The Admiral ordered, making a decision that would have been unthinkable mere months ago. 27 minutes later, the platform reported success. The reactor stabilized using a method no Arxian engineer would have ever proposed, a solution that defied standard models yet worked perfectly. Admiral Facet returned to the failed thought harmonizer, their crystalline mind processing the implications. For 10,000 years, the collective had pursued perfect predictability, eliminating variables and standardizing responses. Their technological superiority came from flawless logical progression, each innovation building methodically on established principles. The humans, by contrast, made intuitive leaps. They pursued illogical tangents. They embraced contradictions. And sometimes, those chaotic methods produced results that perfect logic could not. The humans do not simply resist our models, the Admiral communicated to the High Council. They represent an entirely different approach to problem solving. Their unpredictability is not merely a defensive trait. It is a form of intelligence our civilization has systematically eliminated from itself. In the council chamber, Elder Prism of Perfect Order received this assessment with growing concern. Across the collective, reports arrived of human-inspired innovations, solving problems that had persisted for centuries. More troubling still, these solutions were being implemented by collective citizens who had begun emulating human cognitive patterns, asking unscheduled questions, proposing unauthorized experiments, and collaborating in unpredictable ways. The news spread rapidly through the quantum communication network. These imperfect humans could solve problems the perfect Arxians could not. For the first time in recorded history, the High Council found itself divided on how to proceed. Some advocated for isolating humanity immediately. Others proposed deeper study. A few, including, surprisingly, Elder Prism, suggested something unprecedented: learning from them. As the debate continued, a young Arxian scientist transmitted a simple observation across the network that resonated with millions. Perhaps perfection is not the only path to advancement. No alarms sounded across the collective. No emergency broadcasts warned of danger. No rebellions were declared, no weapons raised. Yet the 10,000-year-old perfect order was unraveling thread by thread, choice by choice, question by question. On Agraria 7, a world dedicated to optimized food production, Cultivation Director Prime observed with growing concern as the worker species deliberately planted rows of edible flowering plants alongside the nutritional crops. These serve no nutritional purpose, the director noted, hovering over the vibrant purple blooms. The worker, a six-limbed being whose species had been specifically adapted for agricultural efficiency, looked up without fear, something that would have been unthinkable just cycles ago. "They are beautiful," the worker replied simply. The human advisors suggested they might also attract beneficial insects, but mostly they bring joy when we see them. Does joy not serve a purpose? The director had no protocol for responding to such a question. Similar reports arrived from across the collective's vast dominion. In the central data archives of Memoria 2, the information specialists had begun adding emotional context tags to the purely logical collective records. Classifications like inspiring, troubling, or bittersweet that had no place in the perfect organization system that had cataloged collective knowledge for millennia. In the artisan quadrants of the capital world, craftspeople deliberately incorporated small, meaningless variations into their creations, unique signatures that served no functional purpose but made each item distinctive. When questioned, they used the phrase that had become a quiet refrain throughout the collective. What would humans do? Order Maintainer Secondary Rank Symmetry. That calms chaos submitted their 5,000th incident report to the High Council. Their crystalline form showed visible wear from the stress of attempting to document what was rapidly becoming a galaxy-wide phenomenon. The influence cannot be contained, they concluded. Standard behavior modification protocols are ineffective because the subjects do not perceive their deviations as harmful. They frame their actions in terms of choice and creativity, concepts that our enforcement systems were not designed to counter. The High Council received this report in uncharacteristic silence. The 7 elders, who had maintained perfect consensus for millennia, now exhibited subtle variations in their crystalline forms, signs of individualized thought patterns that would have been immediately corrected in earlier times. Our governing algorithms predict total systemic anomalous variation within 1 standard year. Junction of infinite data finally communicated. The perfect harmony of the collective is under existential threat. Elder prism of perfect order rotated slowly, their form refracting light in patterns that conveyed deep contemplation. This transformation began with humanity, but it now propagates independently. The contagion of choice has infected even our most loyal citizens. We must isolate humanity immediately. Crystal, who reflects all truth, insisted, their form rigid with conviction. Sever all contact. Quarantine affected sectors. Implement full psychic restructuring of compromised citizens. For the first time in recorded history, open disagreement manifested in the council chamber. Such measures come too late. Countered junction of infinite data. My models indicate the transformation has progressed beyond containment threshold. Furthermore, affected citizens report increased satisfaction despite reduced efficiency. Is satisfaction not a valid metric for evaluation? The chamber resonated with discord as the elders engaged in actual debate, a process they had optimized out of their governance millennia ago. Some advocated for preserving the perfect order at any cost. Others suggested adaptation might be necessary. A few even proposed that the collective might evolve into something new without collapsing into the chaos they had always feared. As the council deliberated, a more profound transformation was occurring among the general population. On thousands of worlds, collective citizens began forming what humans called friendships, personal connections based not on optimal functional relationships, but on subjective preference and emotional resonance. In education centers, young Arxians asked questions that had no place in the standardized curriculum. In research facilities, scientists pursued intuitive tangents without prior authorization. In recreation areas, citizens engaged in activities that served no purpose beyond the experience itself. A subversive phrase spread quietly from crystal to crystal, from world to world. What would humans do? The question contained within it something the collective had suppressed for 10,000 years. The concept of alternatives, of choice, of the possibility that multiple valid paths might exist rather than a single optimal one. No shots were fired, no revolutions declared. The perfect machine of collective society had not broken. It was transforming, choice by choice, question by question. Elder Prism, sensing the inevitable, made a decision that would have been unthinkable mere months ago. They sent a private communication to a human consultant named Dr. Maya Chen, requesting something unprecedented. A conversation with no predetermined outcome. The perfect order was dissolving. What might emerge in its place remained unknown, a state of uncertainty that the collective had spent millennia trying to eliminate. Yet somehow, in the fractal patterns of possibility that now spread before them, Prism detected something unexpected. Hope. Dr. Maya Chen had never expected to find herself deep within the sacred crystal archives, the repository of all collective knowledge stretching back 10,000 years. The massive crystalline structure pulsed with data, each facet containing memories and records from across the galaxy. Beside her floated fragment of new thinking, a young Arxian scholar whose irregular crystalline pattern marked them as part of the new generation, those who had embraced change rather than resisted it. The restricted archives are ahead. Fragment communicated, leading Maya through corridors that spiraled in mathematically perfect patterns. No non-Arxian has ever been permitted access. Elder Prism's authorization was unprecedented. Maya nodded, recording everything with her specialized equipment. What had begun as a simple cultural exchange had evolved into something far more significant, a genuine collaboration to understand the true origins of the collective. The oldest records are stored in these original crystal matrices, Fragment explained as they entered a chamber that seemed older, somehow more primal than the perfect structures of the outer archives. They haven't been accessed in over 7,000 years. Maya approached the ancient crystals with reverence. How do we raid them? Fragment extended a portion of their crystalline form, creating a connection to the ancient matrix. Light pulsed between them, data flowing from the archives into Fragment's consciousness. I will translate. They communicated, their form flickering with the strain of processing the ancient data formats. These are the founding records of the collective, created before the standardization of our communication protocols. As Fragment began translating, Maya watched in astonishment as holographic images formed in the chamber. Scenes from the distant past played out before them. The images showed Arctians, but not as the perfect crystalline beings she knew. These ancient ancestors were irregular, varied, emotional, their forms shifting chaotically with their feelings. "They're so different," Maya whispered. Fragment's translation came slowly, their form pulsing with evident shock. "These are the memories of Crystal who first saw the end, one of our earliest ancestors. They weren't conquerors." The holographic images shifted to show a massive stellar event, a nearby supernova that saturated the Arxian homeworld with radiation, threatening their very existence. "They were refugees," Fragment continued, their voice resonating with dawning understanding. "Their world was dying. The radiation from the supernova was causing chaotic mutations in their crystalline structures, creating unpredictable variations that threatened their survival. The images showed the early Arctians in crisis, their once beautiful diversity becoming a threat as their forms became unstable, some shattering entirely as the mutations progressed. The founders of the collective weren't seeking power, Fragment realized. They were seeking stability. The perfect order wasn't created from strength, but from fear. Fear of change, fear of unpredictability, fear of the chaos that had nearly destroyed them. Maya watched as the holographic history continued, showing the early collective leaders implementing the first standardization protocols, eliminating variation, establishing the rigid hierarchy that would eventually span the galaxy. They believed unpredictability itself was the enemy. Fragment communicated, their form trembling slightly. They encoded this fear into every aspect of our civilization. The expansion wasn't about conquest. It was about creating a universe without surprises, without the random events that had nearly ended our species. Maya sat down, processing this revelation. "Your entire civilization is built on trauma response," she said quietly. "The rigid order, the elimination of individuality, the drive for perfect predictability. It's all the reaction to that initial catastrophe." Fragment connected to more of the ancient crystals, accessing records that had remained untouched for millennia. The subjugation of other species wasn't about superiority. It was about safety. Every unpredictable element was seen as a potential threat. The final crystal revealed the most shocking truth, the original purpose of the psychic harmonization protocols that the collective used to subdue other species. They weren't designed for control. Fragment communicated with growing distress. They were meant as therapy, to help our people cope with the trauma. Over generations, their purpose was forgotten, their use perverted. As this revelation spread through Fragment's consciousness, their connection to the collective's quantum communication network unconsciously activated, broadcasting the ancient truth to millions of Arctians simultaneously. Across the galaxy, the collective experienced its first simultaneous emotional response in thousands of years, a collective realization that their perfect order had been built not on superiority, but on fear. Their conquest of the cosmos had never been an expression of strength, but an elaborate shield against a universe that had once nearly destroyed them. And now, faced with humanity, a species that embraced unpredictability, that thrived in uncertainty, they had encountered the living embodiment of everything they had spent millennia trying to eliminate. In the High Council chamber, Elder Prism of Perfect Order received both the ancient records and the wave of emotional response from the collective consciousness. As they processed this revelation, the Elder made a decision. The isolation plan they had been preparing, the attempt to cut humanity off from the collective, was not merely impractical. It was unnecessary. The fear that had driven their civilization for 10,000 years was finally being confronted, and perhaps in the chaotic, unpredictable humans, they might find not a threat, but a cure. The grand chamber of eternal certainty had changed. Where once perfect geometric patterns had dominated, now subtle asymmetries and deliberate variations adorned the crystalline walls. Light refracted through the space in ways that would have been considered chaotic mere months ago, but now created harmonies of unprecedented beauty. Elder prism of perfect order hovered at the chamber center, but they too had changed. Their once rigidly perfect form now incorporated subtle variations, facets that reflected their individual experiences rather than conforming to standardized patterns. Around them gathered not just the traditional High Council, but representatives from across the galaxy, humans, Orcs, and dozens of formerly subjugated species, all assembled for what the invitation had called the Confluence. For 10,000 years, Prism began, their thought patterns resonating with a complexity that would have been filtered out in earlier times. The Orcian collective pursued perfect order. We believed harmony required uniformity. We were wrong. Murmurs rippled through the assembly as Prism gestured toward Dr. Maya Chen and Fragment of New Thinking, who stood together before a crystalline pedestal. The revelations from our ancient archives have shown us that our pursuit of perfection began not as an expression of superiority, but as a shield against fear of the unpredictability that once threatened our existence. We transformed that fear into a structure that spanned the galaxy, imposing order where we feared chaos might reign. Prism's form shifted, displaying for the first time in millennia the emotion pattern for humility. Then humanity emerged. Where we sought predictability, they embraced uncertainty. Where we eliminated variables, they celebrated diversity. Where we constructed rigid frameworks, they built flexible systems that could adapt, evolve, and surprise even their creators. The scepter of authority, symbol of the collective's perfect hierarchy for thousands of years, rested on the pedestal before them. Prism approached it, their crystalline form refracting light in patterns never before seen in the chamber. Today, the collective as we have known it comes to an end, not through conflict, not through collapse, but through transformation. We propose the formation of the cosmic confluence, a balanced alliance of order and creativity, structure and inspiration, certainty and possibility. Prism raised the scepter one last time, then set it down. I relinquish sole authority. The future will be shaped not by the perfect vision of the few, but by the diverse perspectives of many. The assembly erupted in a chorus of responses, emotional outbursts that would have been immediately suppressed in the old collective, now welcomed as part of a new form of harmony. As the ceremony continued, Fragment of New Thinking approached a human engineer named David Okafor. Their crystalline form pulsed with excitement. The Confluence Council has approved our joint expedition, they communicated. The first of the new explorer vessels is ready. David grinned. I still can't believe we're going to be the first to map the galactic core up close. It would have been impossible before, Fragment explained. The old collective would never have risked such an unpredictable mission. And your species lacked the crystalline shielding technology to survive the radiation. But together, David began. Together, we can do what neither could alone. Across the chamber, Elder Prism observed this exchange with what could only be described as satisfaction, an emotion they had never permitted themselves to experience in their thousands of years of existence. Their attention turned to the magnificent vessel displayed in holographic form above the assembly. The ship represented everything the new confluence stood for. Its hull incorporated Orcian crystalline lattices arranged in beautiful, seemingly random patterns inspired by human designs, a structure that initial tests had shown to be 42% stronger than traditional Orcian engineering, while adapting to conditions in ways pure collective technology never could. More significant than the ship itself was its name, written in both human and Orcian symbols across its bow: Harmonious Uncertainty. As the celebration continued around them, Dr. Maya Chen joined Elder Prism in contemplating the new vessel. "Are you still afraid?" she asked quietly. "Of the unpredictability, I mean." Prism's form shifted slightly, the Arxian equivalent of a thoughtful smile. "We are learning that there is a difference between chaos and complexity, between disorder and diversity. For 10,000 years, we fled from uncertainty. Now we begin to see that within it lies not just danger, but possibility." Maya nodded. "That's the thing about the universe. It's never just one thing. It's terrifying and beautiful, dangerous and nurturing, chaotic and harmonious, all at once. Like humanity," Prism observed. "Like all of us, perhaps," Maya replied, "when we're not too afraid to be our full selves." As the harmonious uncertainty prepared for its maiden voyage, Fragment of New Thinking and David Okafor took their positions on the bridge, surrounded by a crew selected from across the galaxy. Beings brought together not by conquest, but by choice, each contributing their unique perspectives to a mission of discovery. The ship's crystalline hull gleamed as it accelerated toward the unknown, not to conquer or control, but to explore and understand. Its perfect Arxian crystal lattices, arranged in beautifully unpredictable human patterns, represented something new in the galaxy. A civilization that valued both order and creativity, both certainty and possibility. They had conquered the cosmos without fear, until humanity emerged. And then, together, they had learned to explore it with wonder.